In the last 19 months, we've witnessed something truly extraordinary, unprecedented actually, in America and in American history. We have been witness to 3 serious attempts on the life of a former and now sitting President of the United States. On July 13th, 2024, in Butler, Pennsylvania, there was a rifle 130 yards from the stage, from elevation, from Building 6, a infamous building, as it turned out, given the fact that there was no protection there. It was completely overlooked. A bullet hit the president in his head, which is his ear is part of his head, so that counts as a headshot hitting him in the ear. It was the equivalent of the president pulling 3 back-to-back royal straight flushes, the fact that he looked very briefly at the television screen at the exact instant that Thomas Matthew Crooks pulled the trigger. A firefighter was murdered and 2 civilians seriously wounded during that attempt on July 13th. We fast forward 64 days later, on September 15th, 2024, at the Trump International Golf Club, a scoped rifle and an assassin, a wannabe assassin, hidden in the brush line on the fence line of the golf course while the president was on the course. On February 21st, 2026, at 1:47 a.m. at Mar-a-Lago's North Gate, yet another assassin intent on killing the president breached the North Gate security, likely by taking advantage of a slow-closing gate. I happen to be very familiar with that gate. I've gone through it probably 100 times, usually on a motorcycle, when I'm exiting Mar-a-Lago, where I happen to be a member. This attacker came in, breached the security, armed with a shotgun and a gas can at 1:47 a.m. at the Southern White House. Let's let that sink in. 3 separate armed men, Thomas Matthew Crooks, Austin Tucker Martin, and Rousey. 3 separate operational environments. 3 separate penetration attempts. And here is the material fact. The president was not even on site at Mar-a-Lago during that breach. He was in Washington, D.C. This means the attacker was not reacting to the proximity of the president. He was just dead set on intent to get into Mar-a-Lago if the president was there, to shoot and kill the president or shoot and kill others, which is why he had a loaded shotgun and was able to get through the North Gate at almost 2 a.m. This is determined murderous intent. The president himself said it plainly after this breach. Quote, "There are a lot of people gunning for me," end quote. And that is not rhetoric, ladies and gentlemen. That is reality. President Trump is on the radar and has been on the radar for some very, very bad people, highly motivated people, ideologically poisoned and driven people who were patient. Crooks was patient. Rousey was patient. He was there for 12 hours. These are people who study patterns, who make it their business to understand and identify and leverage breaches in security or prospective chinks in the armor of a security plan. Now, as someone who has been in the security business for close to 4 decades, I understand extremely well how security plans and operating methodologies to protect principles operate. And I also recognize that they reduce risk. They do not ever completely eliminate risk. And that is a critical aspect of a pragmatic and intelligently formulated security plan, because there are always a microscopic or micro gap somewhere in there that someone with ill intent, in this case, these three armed individuals who are studying, who do their homework, who analyze the facts as it relates to the available security plan indoctrination, and they look for openings. And it only has to be a couple of seconds, almost a split second. So these are people who wait. They wait. And they lay figuratively and literally in the bush, as it turned out, at the golf course. This is terrifying stuff. Because when the President of the United States is the focus of sustained lethal motivation by politically driven and ideologically poisoned and polluted individuals, security is not routine. It cannot be routine, ever. It is a war footing, a vigilance like a war footing. It must be the most comprehensive, protective security plan on planet Earth. 24 hours a day it has to work, 7 days a week it has to work, and 365 days a year it has to work. It must work. No complacency, no fatigue, no micro gaps, not even for a split second. Because split seconds become openings. Split seconds become leverage. And leverage change history. Because leverage can become tragedy. The fact that President Trump survived July 13th, 2024, getting shot in the ear by a .442 AR round is beyond even pulling 3 Royal Straight Flushes in a row. I know quite a few military folks who worked with me and for me, and friends and colleagues, and I've asked them all over the months, have they ever heard of a similar situation where someone was shot in the head and it actually hit their ear and they survived? And not one single one of them knew of a similar incident. But this is beyond extraordinary on every single level. But what it's really about is executive protection doctrine.
1 minute.
When you have 3 attempts in 19 months, you don't shrug it off. You don't normalize it. Dissect it. Unwavering precision with analytical hyperfocus and with an auditory mind, because you have to audit it. You have to analyze every perimeter, every rooftop, every tree line, every gate cycle, every shift rotation of the officers assigned. And you have to be prepared in this analysis to identify prospective failures. This is relentless. This is unwavering. And then, once you identify prospective failures, you correct them immediately. Because the presidency of the United States is the single most targeted office on planet Earth. And its security program, protecting that office, must be bulletproof in structure, 24/7, 365. Tonight, we are going to examine those 3 events.
In today's world, risk doesn't announce itself. It hides in plain sight. That's where Brosnan Consulting Services comes in. Founded by industry veteran Patrick J. Brosnan, we provide risk advisory and protective intelligence solutions for individuals, corporations, and institutions that can't afford uncertainty. From due diligence and investigative consulting to strategic intelligence and protection planning, we help you see threats before they become problems. When experience matters and discretion is essential, trust Brosnan Consulting Services. Visit brosnaninvestigative.com to learn more.
Welcome back, folks. It's Pat Brosnan live from the Batcave. Here today discussing the 3 separate assassination attempts on President Donald J. Trump in the last 19 months. An unprecedented and a terrifying sequence of attempts on our president. And over these past months, during these 3 separate assassination attempts at 3 different locations, 3 entirely different environments, right? We had the Butler Farm Grounds, we had the Palm Beach Golf Course, and then we had the North Gate at Mar-a-Lago, the Winter White House. So these are 3 entirely different environments with 3 entirely different armed men, 3 different tactical approaches, one unifying truth. Each event, each assassination attempt stress tested a different component, a different element of a methodical and comprehensive protective plan. And when a security plan is stress tested, it either absorbs the impact or it exposes weaknesses. It exposes flaws. It exposes, in February 1st, a micro gap in terms of a slow closing gate. But on July 13th, 2024, at the Butler Farm Show grounds in Pennsylvania, a location I have physically stood outside at Building 6 in early August, and at September 15th, 2024, the Trump International Golf Club in Florida, I have personally stood at the fence line where the rifle was concealed within a couple of days of the arrest of Rousey. And on February 21st, 2026, at the Mar-a-Lago North Gate, I have exited that gate countless times over the last couple of years, often on a motorcycle. I am intimately familiar with how the gate cycles, how it closes, how it opens, and the length of time for it to close and for it to open. So, 3 armed men, 3 penetration attempts, 3 micro gaps. And here is where this begins. Bad guys are studying us. They're studying the president. They're studying his routine, his patterns. They're studying perimeters, rooftops, tree lines, fence lines, gate timing. They are studying patterns and looking for an opening. It's precisely what they're doing. In the case of Thomas Matthew Crooks on July 13th, 2024, he augmented his study, he augmented his research, drone patrol, where he was able to gather video via his own drone, which he launched inexplicably at Butler, undetected for the most part, and certainly not stopped in any way. So these so-called chinks in the security armor, the 2 to 3 seconds, the gate that closes a bit too slow, the area in the bush where a black fence with deep foliage at the golf course allowed the assassin a measure of cover, a blind angle, a building, Building 6, just outside the perimeter, or designated inaccurately to be outside the perimeter. These are micro gaps. These are weaknesses in the brutal asymmetry of executive protection. These are openings. And the bad guys only need one opening. Let's be clear on that. One opening. Security must close every opening seamlessly. They have to weld them shut every minute, every event, every movement. So if the bad guys are studying us, we must study them harder. We being the Secret Service, we being the Sheriff's Department in Palm Beach, we being the various law enforcement agencies in Butler. Law enforcement collectively must study them harder, must study them closer. We must understand everyone who is in proximity to the president at all times. If we do not, we'll be leaving an opening, a sliver of an opening, instantaneous microsecond of an opening when they can attack. And that's all they need. They only have to be right once. We, the good guys, have to be right all the time. So the protective details really need the equivalent of 20/20 X-ray vision. It's what they really need. It's a big ask, but it's what they signed up for. It's what they're trained for. It's what I did with Mayor Giuliani when he was the mayor back in the early 90s in New York City. We had X-ray vision. We were always scanning, always assessing, always grading the threat environment, making certain that nothing was out of order. And every person has to be a moving data point of sorts, because every approach of the principal, whether it was Mayor Giuliani at the time or whether it's President Trump today, becomes a prospective threat picture. Well, you have to look for subtle movement. You have to look for clues. You have to look for anomalies. This is what they must do. This is what they have to do. A jacket, it hangs unnaturally. Why is it hanging unnaturally? Oh, maybe there's a shoulder holster under that jacket. Or a pocket, it sags unnaturally. Why is it sagging unnaturally? Maybe it's got a handgun in there, and it's dragging the pocket down a bit, and then maybe on close analysis or close review of that pocket, you see an outline that's consistent of a handgun. They're all clues. This is the 20/20 vision. This is what they must do. This is what they have to do. They have to look at pants legs. They have to look at legs that swing differently in a gait, in a stride, which would suggest a possible ankle holster with a weapon. An arm that doesn't swing freely. Again, it would be a shoulder rake. These are clues. This is what they are trained to do. This is what they must do, 24/7, 365. I call this pragmatic paranoia. About it. Makes a lot of sense. Paranoia gets a bad knock, right? It's generally got a negative intonation. Not in this case. You want to have measured and pragmatic paranoia on the part of the folks who are commissioned to, who are sworn to protect the President of the United States. Be worried, and be worried all the time. Trust no one. Verify and triple check. Validate, quadruple check. This is pragmatic paranoia. This is disciplined vigilance. This is controlled suspicion. Trust, but validate. Don't double check, you triple check, and then you check again. Security must be an unblinking eye. It's a heavy lift because they're just human. The fact is, that's what they signed up for, and that's their job, and that's what they must do and what they're sworn to do. So they have to develop, if they don't already have, eyes not just in the backs of their head, eyes on the sides of their heads. 360 degrees of situational awareness. Radar has to be up at all times. Because let's face it, fatigue can creep in, distraction creeps in. These are human conditions. This is what could occur, and this is what must be prevented and trained against, because distraction is the enemy of vigilance. As we've seen, and we've seen now 3 times, microseconds become seconds. And seconds, just a few, can become access. And access can be a nightmare. can become a tragic and a nightmare of epic proportions. So now let's talk about what happens when discipline erodes, because it did. 3 separate times. 1, 2, 3. 3 times. The president's life hung in the balance. Butler, catastrophic failure on every level. After July 13th, I traveled to Butler. I went there on a motorcycle. I physically walked the Butler Farm Show grounds. I stood at the sightline where the stage was, and I was able to examine from the exterior only, but closely from all 4 sides, the infamous Building 6. Building that was excluded from the perimeter despite having a dead-on sight line to the stage at 130 yards, a distance that even an intermediate shooter could accomplish with relative ease. As we saw with the 19-year-old Thomas Matthew Crooks, the nursing home aide that I wouldn't entrust with a sponge bath, but I can tell you unequivocally, Building 6 dominated that southern edge. Dominated it. It was elevated. It was a direct line of sight at 150 or so yards. Very controlled rifle distance. Well, again, was identified early on during some of the advanced analysis of the site by various agencies. It was identified as a vulnerability. I mean, Stevie Wonder would have seen it. Let's be honest. This was a complete ground ball. But then inexplicably and incomprehensibly, it was excluded from the inner perimeter. That decision alone created the assassin's perch. It gave Thomas Matthew Crooks a little nest from which to set up shop. And set up shop he did, getting off 8 rounds, a volley of 3 and a volley of 5. If Building 6 had been pulled inside the envelope, if it had been brought inside the perimeter, everything would have changed. Parking, access, roof access, even drone overwatch. Everything would have changed. But instead, a massive, colossal, and biblical catastrophic planning decision. And we cannot allow that. That cannot be allowed. That is absolutely taboo. It can never, ever occur. And that is a material fact. And we're going to come up against a hard break here, folks. It's Pat Brosnan live from the Batcave, and we're going to come back and we're going to look a little bit further and deeper into what Thomas Matthew Crooks did in the days before and on that day on July 13th, and really how incomprehensible it is in the context of a security planning, communication, and coordination failure. But stay tuned. We'll come back and we will dig into the facts. Facts, fury, and forensic precision here at the Batcave with Pat Brosnan. Stay tuned, folks.
When the storm hits or when your trees need serious care, you call O'Sullivan Tree Care. O'Sullivan Tree Care is a fully licensed and insured family-owned company, proudly serving Rockland County, Westchester County, and New Jersey. Their experienced team handles it all: tree removals, precision pruning, stump grinding, crane work, and emergency storm cleanup. Fast, safe, and professional. When severe weather strikes, O'Sullivan Tree Care responds when it matters most, clearing dangerous trees, restoring access, and protecting homes and properties. They also supply high-quality mulch and screen topsoil available for pickup or delivery. You call, they haul. What sets O'Sullivan Tree Care apart is reliability under pressure. When others step back, their crew steps forward. Experienced, equipped, and ready to work in the toughest conditions. So whether you're dealing with storm damage, downed trees, or routine property maintenance, make the call to the team you can trust. O'Sullivan Tree Care, 845-359-8733. That's 845-359-8733. O'Sullivan Tree Care, where quality meets reliability and the job gets done right.
Welcome back, folks. It's Pat Brosnan live from the Batcave. We're here today dissecting and reconstructing with an analytical and objective eye the material facts surrounding the 3 separate attempted assassination attempts on President Trump in the last 19 months. And it is truly, truly mind-blowing as we look at the known and public and available material facts surrounding the timelines and what occurred within the construct of those attempted assassinations. So we're going to go to July 13th to Thomas Matthew Crooks, the aforementioned dietitian's aide at the nursing home, 19 years old, barely out of his teens, no training that was known of, a complete anomaly. Yet there was, as it turned out, an ocean of vitriol, a tsunami of hatred and poisonous invective that he had been generating publicly across a number of social media platforms that went completely unnoticed, completely undetected, and not in any way mitigated, identified, or investigated as it relates to his statements, which were numerous, relative to his hatred of the president and his intent to cause harm to him. This is mind-blowing, and it flies in the face of the publicly stated agenda of various federal agencies that are allegedly monitoring social media sites for this type of statement or these types of statements so that they can intercede, identify, and disrupt. Well, none of that happened. Crooks visited a couple of days before. When he visited, he, by the way, not law enforcement, but the nursing home aide, he flew his own drone. He put a drone up as part of his reconnaissance, as part of his personal advance agenda, and as part of his collection of facts that would be supportive of his mission, which was on July 13th, to murder the President of the United States. So he put a drone up. Nobody else in law enforcement bothered to put one up, which is just a biblical level failure in terms of rudimentary and elemental surveillance, investigation, and fact collection to inform a comprehensive security plan. But he put one up, we know that, and then he came back on the 13th, was spotted multiple times. And let's be crystal clear. This kid, he actually looked like the kid from Sandy Hook a number of years back, that nightmare. He stepped right out of central casting for the disillusioned, gothic-looking, disaffected, loner type of teenager who we see so frequently, that precise look on these multiple shootings, wearing a backpack and carrying, of all things, and this is really mind-bending, he's carrying a spotting scope. So let's be clear what a spotting scope is. It's not a binocular. It only has one function. It's not there to look at birds and to look at a ball game or to look at the stage in any closer way as a binoculars would afford. Its sole purpose, spotting scope, is to gauge the distance for a long-distance rifle shot. That's what it does. It gauges the distance to help with accuracy. This is what Thomas Matthew Crooks was carrying. That's like carrying a sign on his chest that said, I'm gauging the distance to the stage to ensure an accurate rifle shot. That's what a spotting scope signifies. You know the reason for it. So, a spotting scope, a knapsack, flying a drone, incomprehensible, an absolute ocean of clues and suspicious behavior that should have been identified, investigated, and disrupted within moments. But instead, he was photographed, he was texted about, he was radioed about. He became a person of interest of some type 62 minutes before the shots were fired. So at 5:14 p.m., he points a rangefinder toward the stage. 5:42 p.m., A radio call from law enforcement describes him sighting the stage with a rangefinder. 5:46 p.m., Secret Service is yet again notified. Again, unbelievably, he vanishes. 6 full minutes. 6 full minutes, 360 seconds. They lose sight of him. He vanishes, becomes a ghost. Now, 6 minutes in the world of executive protection is an eternity. Well, he vanished. And to add complete insult to injury, just so our listeners and viewership understand how he gained access, he went around the magnetometers into an excluded area, drove his vehicle with the weapons and the bullets and improvised explosive devices and a bulletproof vest and a drone and every single possible piece of equipment to support an assassination attempt. He drove it into a specific area where there was parking for the SWAT team, Building 6. Because, by the way, the SWAT team was inside Building 6. They were not outside. They were inside the building, which is a mystery of all mysteries. But put that aside for a moment. Crooks parks next to their cars. He parks his car next to the SWAT team vehicles, vanishes, and then climbs onto the air conditioning unit on Building 6, settles into his little nest up there on the sloped roof, feathers his little assassin's perch, and he fires 8 rounds. Firefighters murdered. The president is struck in the ear. 2 civilians seriously wounded. 22 additional rounds remained in that rifle. The local officers countershot the mysterious shot 9, which I've spoken extensively about, fired at a knee from 100 yards by a sergeant named Zaliponi, Zaliponi. And this was largely unreported, almost secluded from the record for a number of weeks. And that shot, extremely likely, disabled Crook's weapon.
2 minutes.
Broke the stock. It actually wounded him in the face and the neck with broken shards of the stock and disabled the recoil spring. So he could not fire an additional 22 rounds that were in the magazine in the weapon. So he had 30 rounds. He fired 3, then he fired 5, and he had 22 left. With Zaliponi's heroic efforts, his extraordinary once-in-a-lifetime shot busted up not just his rifle, but busted up Crooks's plans. He could not fire another round. And the Southern counter-snipers, the guys who were behind Trump's shoulder, they pivoted 270 degrees, and they were able to, after 10 full seconds, shoot Crooks in the left side of his mouth, exiting on the right cheek, and terminated his life. And stopped the madness, stopped him, prevented him from murdering anyone else. But heroics, like Sergeant Zaliponi's, compensating for catastrophic planning failure is not doctrine. This is just another example of how we got really, really, really lucky despite every possible unifying command principle being
10
disjointed.
minutes. 1 minute.
And that cannot happen again. That cannot happen again. This was not a single failure. It just was a complete erosion, a complete disintegration of a security plan that was written on paper but was not implemented. That roof should never, ever, ever have been available. Ladies and gentlemen, stay tuned. This is Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave, and we will be right back to continue our discussion of these 3 terrifying, extraordinary, and almost inexplicable attempts on President Donald Trump in the last 19 months. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
Is your organization prepared for today's technology and security challenges? At CMS Technology Partners, we deliver customized, best-of-breed solutions that protect your people, your property, and your peace of mind. From AI camera vision and real-time threat detection to advanced mobile weapon screening and X-ray imaging systems, we help you stay ahead of evolving threats without replacing your entire system. Plus, our expert team builds secure, scalable IT infrastructure, network and cloud solutions designed to fit your exact needs. With over 20 years of experience, CMS Technology Partners brings the technology, service, and support your business deserves. Visit callcms.com to see how we can strengthen your security and tech, so you can focus on what matters most.
Hey, folks, Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave. I'm back. I'm back here today, and I'm discussing the extraordinary and terrifying 3 attempted assassinations attempts on President Trump in the last 19 months. So we just finished discussing the biblical level failures, and they were multiple. On July 13, 2024 in Butler, Pennsylvania. And now we're going to fast forward 64 days later. 64, that's it. A month later, 2 months later, at Trump International Golf Club on September 15, 2024. Trump International Golf Club. By the way, I have stood at that fence line where Ralph, the shooter, concealed himself in the brush. I went over there a couple of days later. I was in Palm Beach, and it is inconceivable to me that he was able to be concealed there for 12 long hours. But we'll get to that in a minute. So Routh, the assassin, Ryan Routh, and his skull-mounted rifle were secreted in the bush line on the fence line at the golf course while President Trump was on the golf course playing golf. Let's say that again. While President Trump and his security detail were going from hole to hole at the golf club, there was a human being hidden, secreted, cloistered, the bush line on the other side of a black chain link fence, armed with an automatic rifle with a scope. And he wasn't there for 5 minutes or 15 or 30 minutes, which in itself would have been inexcusable beyond compare. He was there, ladies and gentlemen, for 12 hours, half a day. So, where to start on this? Well, let's start with that every principle, and they are inviolate, every principle of executive protection. The bedrock of it, the advance work. The advance work is the work that the teams do to ensure that the location is safe for their principal to be physically located at during that time. And it's comprehensive. It's deep to the extent that they cover every corner. They make certain that there is no threat whatsoever. And they clear the terrain, the entire terrain, and the accompanying buildings before the principal, in this case, the president, enters. And in this state, every fundamental principle of advanced work was violated. Because let's face it, a chain link fence is not security. It's just a property marker. It's not there for security. It doesn't secure anything. It just marks the property. You know, the outer patrol ring, the sweeping of the brush, the use of dogs to ensure that no one's hidden anywhere. This is all really protection 101. This is very simple stuff. None of it was done. None of it was performed. In fact, one single perimeter mobile officer, one officer on foot, just patrolling the outside of the golf course and walking along without even a dog, would have identified this individual in his little hiding spot. And I know that for a fact because I was precisely where he was hidden, and I was able to see through it with relative ease, just in passing, and would have seen the back of Rousey as he pointed the rifle onto the golf course through the chain link fence. So this is an extraordinary oversight on every level, which violates, as I mentioned, the fundamental principles of protection, which really is the advance work, the homework that you do before you allow the president to be on a golf course and be subject to any type of attack. But instead, we have a black muzzle of this rifle protruding through the foliage and protruding through the fence. And let's be crystal clear. This, again, same way President Trump's looking at the television monitor on July 13th was pulling two Royal straight flushes back to back. The fact that the Secret Service agent detected that thin type, that thin barrel, black barrel against a black fence protruding through the bush, pointed out onto the golf course, is beyond extraordinary. It's some other level of super sharpness that he was able to pin that out from the distance. Preternaturally sharp. This is a super lucky and super skilled. I'll give credit on all of that. And then, of course, he opened fire and was able to the assassin, prevent the attack, and lock him up. And now he's been put away for multiple life sentences. But let's be clear. That was a miracle. Nothing short of a miracle. And miracles are very rare. And we can't depend on that level of rarity and that level of miracle because this was extraordinary. But it was preventable. He would have been easily identified with even the most fundamental advanced work by the team. Now, folks, we go to the Winter White House. We go to Mar-a-Lago and the North Gate of Mar-a-Lago, which is located on A1A on the property. This individual, Austin Thomas Martin, he took advantage of a micro gap. Either he was extremely lucky and fortuitous with his timing, or he did some homework. We don't know for certain because he's no longer with us, and we'll never know unless he shared it with someone else who will share it down the road. But the fact is, he was able to penetrate the security perimeter at the North Gate into Mar-a-Lago, apparently taking advantage of a slow closing gate. And as I mentioned earlier, I have gone through that gate many times, heading east. Not an entry gate going west, it's an entry gate exiting the property. And it does, at the time, did close slowly. I was always on a motorcycle for the most part and kind of zipped right through it. But the reality is he apparently bootstrapped his way in. Either a vehicle was leaving, very likely, and he was able to slip through with a loaded shotgun and a gas canister. This is a micro gap. This is a chink in the armor. This is unacceptable. The fact that the gate cycles eastbound and closes slowly is something that allowed him a few seconds of opportunity, a few seconds of leverage. And he leveraged that opportunity, that little micro window or micro gap, as I mentioned, in an otherwise excellent security plan. Because let's be crystal clear, I'm very familiar with the security at Mar-a-Lago. I haven't been a member there for over 5 years. I salute the Secret Service and the Palm Beach Sheriff's Department, as well as the third-party security that are present on site, providing detection, observance, deterrence, and reporting. They are not armed. The fact is, collectively, it's an excellent brand, but there is always room for improvement. And I personally feel that the inclusion of canines at key locations, Mar-a-Lago, would be an extraordinary deterrent for future attempts or any future criminal behavior or inappropriate behavior. Dogs are terrifying, and bad guys have historically always been horrified by dogs. And I believe that that level of additional protective layering on an already comprehensive security plan could close any prospective or future micro gaps, which would allow bad guys to leverage their way inside the tent, so to speak. And that's critical. And that's key. And that's precisely what I believe is occurring and will occur. Because let's face it, security responded in textbook fashion. They identified instantaneously the threat, they instantaneously disrupted, and they instantaneously neutralized. Now, neutralized is a politically correct kind of way of stating that they shot and killed the armed attacker. The armed attacker with the shotgun and the gas can was shot and killed once he raised that weapon. And that's how it works. That's precisely how it works. That's why the officers from the Palm Beach Sheriff's Department and the agents from the Secret Service carry weapons. That's why they're trained extensively in the use of weapons. That's why they're trained extensively in the parameters regarding the justifiable use of deadly physical force on both the state and the federal level. That is exactly what should have happened and what did happen. And ironically, there are other teams, and I'm not going to get too deep into this because I don't want to ever provide inadvertently even the most remote clue to a copycat attacker. But the fact is, had Austin Thomas Martin somehow miraculously penetrated successfully and breached the exterior team at the North Gate, he would have collided within seconds with additional teams, multitudes of teams, which he never, ever, ever would have been able to go any further to get even remotely close to where the president's residence is located, which, by the way, he was not on site that night. But again, that's neither here nor there. It's all about the fact that he was able to get a few feet in, but a textbook application of security layering and the use of deadly physical force in a justifiable way was implemented, utilized, and executed. And that, ladies and gentlemen, is poetry in motion. Because the best security in the world, is an armed human being with ice in his veins and his head on a swivel. And that's what we had here that date on February 21st. So this is a series of extraordinary attempts on the president's life, 3 in 19 months, 3 different locations, 3 different states, 3 different armed men, but one common denominator. There were micro gaps. Micro gaps are unacceptable. Tiny, tiny little seams, tiny, tiny little fractures in an otherwise bulletproof security plan. Butler, it was perimeter exclusion. At the golf club, it was complacency and lack of advanced work with the terrain and the fence. And at Mar-a-Lago, it was gate. It was gate cycling and gate closing. This is not dramatic Hollywood collapse of security. This is just kind of an incremental erosion or incremental disintegration of a doctrine, of a plan. And I think that's more dangerous, to be very honest with you, because complacency creeps in quietly, and, it sounds like the building is outside, that brush is beyond our line, the gate closes fast enough. No. That only works until it doesn't. Security is not personality driven, it's doctrine given. And doctrine driven is rigid, it's relentless, it's unforgiving. So, no more. We have to be absolutely uber labor focused, every level, every single level, with the folks that are protecting the most important job on the planet, the highest office in the land, and we cannot ever allow a reoccurrence. So it's 24/7, 365, and this is an absolute must. And it's been my pleasure to go through the facts and to examine them here today with you folks, and to understand, to the extent that's publicly available, what precisely unfolded, and more importantly, not to ever share anything that could empower or embolden a copycat, but more importantly, to let the copycats know that when you play stupid games, you win stupid prizes. And we've seen here where Brooks' stupid prize was a bullet in the face. Rousey's got multiple life sentences. And Austin Thomas Martin is also neutralized, as they say, shot and killed, same as Crooks. And that's the way it works out, because we're better, we're smarter, and we're studying them closer than they could ever study us. So that's it, folks. This is Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave, tearing apart, dissecting, reconstructing, and analyzing 3 attempted assassination attempts on President Donald J. Trump. Please tune in next week. We'll have some other terrific guests. This was a special edition because of the extraordinary importance of these attempts, and I wanted to designate a full show to show the gravity and to illustrate the extreme importance of everyone understanding out there what precisely occurred, and how these slight fissures, these slight seams or chinks in the armor of his protection are being rectified and being buttressed and fortified so that it will hopefully never, ever happen again. And that we hope and pray for. Have a great day. Thank you. Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave, signing off, folks. Have a great one.
Pat Brosnan, live from the Batcave, brings together America's foremost voices in law enforcement, intelligence, and national security for hard-hitting, fact-based analysis on crime, homeland security, and domestic counterterrorism. A highly decorated former NYPD detective and national security expert, Brosnan brings razor-sharp perspective and battlefield-tested insight to every conversation. For over 20 years, Pat Brosnan has been a trusted presence on Fox News, Fox Business, Newsmax, CNN, MSNBC, and Inside Edition. Uncompromising, unflinching, unblinking.